Monaco could be on the verge, perhaps, of a critical breakthrough in the Nancy Guthrie case, potentially using a new and cutting-edge technology that has proven to extract DNA.
Bombshell to Tucson and the Nancy Guthrie disappearance. Has a guy been detained overnight for questioning south of Tucson and California? A bombshell arrest.
Some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
There are some puzzling new developments tonight in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie.
The disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie took a visible turn this week.
The press conference started like most others. Reporters packed in tight, cameras aimed forward, everyone waiting for something that would finally break the silence. For weeks, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie had given investigators almost nothing to work with publicly. No confirmed sighting, no explanation, just a woman who had been there and then wasn't. And then a man named Tommaso Cione stepped up to the microphone. He didn't appear rattled. He didn't look like someone carrying the weight of weeks of questions. He looked composed, and in a room full of people who had been waiting for answers, composed stood out immediately. He adjusted the mic, looked at the room, and said 4 words. I was there that night, and just like that, everything shifted. White Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old and had lived in Tucson long enough that she had become part of the fabric of it, the kind of person neighbors don't just recognize, but rely on. Her days followed a rhythm. Morning tea, phone calls to her children at roughly the same time each day. Not because she had to, but because that connection mattered to her. Her daughter described her as someone who held things steady without drawing attention to it. Quiet strength, the kind of person a family circles around without always realizing they're doing it. She was also someone who paid close attention to her affairs. She had documentation in order. She had thought carefully about who held access to what and how her decisions would play out after she was gone. And in the weeks leading up to February 1st, she had started reviewing all of it. Not casually, deliberately. She had spoken with her attorney. She had initiated specific changes. And according to what investigators later pieced together, those changes had a clear direction. They reduced access. They moved control away from certain people. And for someone positioned within that structure, that kind of shift carries weight. Tommaso Cione was not just a distant connection to Nancy. He was embedded in that structure. People who knew him described someone who was attentive in a particular way, not aggressive, not overtly controlling, but always aware of how systems worked, who made decisions, where the leverage was. That kind of attention usually stays quiet until something disrupts it, and something had. By the evening of February 1st, that disruption was no longer theoretical. Food had been ordered for 2 that night. Tommaso arrived, and from the outside nothing appeared wrong. No noise audible to neighbors, no visible disturbance. But Nancy left a voicemail for her attorney that same evening. The exact words have not been made public. What investigators noted was the timing. Leaving a message for your lawyer on the same night a known source of tension is inside your home is not something that gets overlooked. And something else was recording that night. Not intentionally, not visibly. Nancy had a pacemaker, a device that had been part of her daily life for so long, it had probably stopped feeling like technology. But devices like that don't just regulate, they log. They track cardiac rhythm in real time. And on February 1st, that log became the most important timeline in the entire investigation. At 8:42 in the evening, the device recorded a sudden change. Not gradual, abrupt, the kind of shift associated with acute fear or physical stress. 5 minutes later, at 8:47, it recorded movement. Not walking, not routine motion. Irregular, forceful movement. The kind that suggests a body responding to something happening to it. At 8:52, readings escalated into what medical experts would later classify as a cardiac event. And at 9:03, the signal stopped transmitting. 21 minutes. From first distress to silence. When investigators arrived at the house, the door was properly locked. No broken glass, no signs of forced entry anywhere, which meant whoever had been inside that night had been let in. And that narrows things considerably. Inside, the scene didn't look overturned. But trained eyes don't need chaos. They need inconsistency, wanting a cushion slightly off, an object that had clearly been handled and repositioned. Small things. Then the garage. The door had been left at a specific angle. From inside the house, unremarkable. From the street, it created a precise blind spot. That's not accidental. That's someone thinking about what can and cannot be seen. Then the security system. Nancy's home had cameras positioned at key entry points, continuous recording, stored footage. When investigators accessed the system, they found gaps, short ones. But they aligned almost exactly with the 21-minute window the pacemaker had recorded, and the gaps weren't the result of a technical failure. The system had been accessed remotely using the correct password and placed into maintenance mode. Maintenance mode doesn't send alerts. It doesn't flag anything. It simply stops recording quietly. After the system was disabled, one camera showed signs of physical interference. But that came second. The sequence matters. You disable first, then you act. That's not panic. Panic doesn't work in sequence. Panic creates noise and disorder and mistakes. This did not. Nancy's phone was still inside. Her medication untouched. Personal items exactly where they belonged. An 84-year-old woman does not walk out of her own home at night without any of those things, which meant she didn't walk out. 8 minutes after the pacemaker signal went dark, a message was sent from Tommaso's phone. One word. Handled. That word became central to everything that followed. Not because of its length, but because of what it implies. Handled is not confusion. It's not panic. It's confirmation. It suggests something was completed, and it was sent to someone, which means someone was waiting for it. That someone was connected to a prepaid phone, the kind purchased with cash, no registered name. But phones move. They ping towers, and when investigators pulled the data, that prepaid phone had been in the same general area during the same time window. Tommaso had not been alone. Cell tower data then tracked movement away from the house, through less traveled roads, service roads, open stretches, areas where a vehicle moving at night wouldn't attract attention. The route wasn't the fastest path out of the neighborhood. It was the kind of path someone takes when they are actively avoiding visibility, and it led into the desert outside Tucson. Because the desert is where things disappear. Search teams moved in grid patterns, thus measured spacing, slow passes. Because in terrain like that, moving too quickly means missing things. They started where the data showed movement had slowed, where a device had lingered longer than anywhere else along that path. The first sign was tire impressions, shallow but defined, edges still sharp enough to indicate recent activity. They documented everything and expanded outward from that point. That's when the soil changed, the color slightly off, the texture looser than the surrounding ground. The shape not random? They marked it, brought in the right team, and they excavated carefully, layer by layer. First, they found fabric, heavy material folded into itself, the kind used to wrap or conceal. Then underneath it, small, rectangular, partially covered in sand but intact, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker casing. A pacemaker is not something that ends up buried in a desert by accident. It is a medical device embedded inside a person's body. Removing it is a decision. And removing it because it holds a record of exactly what that body went through is a calculation. Whoever did that understood what the device contained, which means they were thinking about evidence before the night was over. That level of deliberate thinking points towards something other than a reaction. It points towards someone with a plan, or at minimum, someone guiding one. Cell tower data showed the movement continuing past that first desert stop. The path split. One device turned back toward the city. The second continued further out, deeper, toward a second location, a site with different characteristics, more concealed, less exposed, more permanent. And that is where the search continues now. Tommaso's admission placed him at the center of the timeline. His account shifted under questioning. He acknowledged calling someone, an associate, someone he said he trusted to help him manage the situation. That word, manage, reframed everything. Because managing a situation is not the same as responding to one. It implies control, and control implies intent. Inside the house on February 1st, a smart speaker captured one final piece of audio. A few seconds. Nancy's voice. One word. Please. Then a sound. Heavy. Impact. Then nothing. That recording does not explain everything, but it confirms she was conscious and aware for some part of what happened, which means there were moments where a different choice could have been made, and no different choice was. Nancy Guthrie is not a case number. She is a person who drank her morning tea in the same spot every day and called her children because she liked the sound of their voices. She is still missing. The investigation is active. Up to $1 million in reward money is available. FBI tip line 1-800-CALL-FBI. Online, tips.fbi.gov. Anonymous tips, Crime Stoppers Tucson, 52088-CRIME. You do not need a name. You do not need certainty. One detail is sometimes enough. And somewhere beyond that second path in the desert, there is still an answer waiting to be found.